You might be one of those people who says, "What the heck does trauma have to do with my PMDD?" Well, Lisa de Jong, our next expert, she's going to tell us how trauma, your hormones, and your nervous system are actually interconnected, and that this can actually strongly, and it does affect your PMDD symptoms. And she's, of course, also going to share what we can do to support ourselves, how we can find relief, how we can get ourselves back into a more regulated state. Lisa is back, and it's gonna be so good. Woo! Here we go. Welcome to the PMDD Healing Summit, where the world's top experts share hope, guidance, and next steps for your PMDD healing journey. And today I am so happy to welcome back Lisa de Jong. And Lisa was a highlight of last year's summit. That's why I'm so glad that she said yes. Let me tell you a little bit about Lisa. Lisa is a well-being and health coach specializing in the menstrual cycle, chronic pain, somatic mental health, and nervous system regulation. She helps people to feel better in their bodies and improve other areas of their lives through a somatic approach. Her work is informed by neuroscience, biology, psychology, as well as her own personal journey with chronic pain. She works with clients through private one-on-one work, group workshops, and online courses, and she offers free consultations and resources on her website. You're going to get all the links, all the goodies. Thank you, Lisa, for being here again.
Thanks, Charisma. It's so good to be here. Happy birthday for the summit.
Happy birthday, Summit. Oh, thank you. You're so right. I should have some cake today. So Lisa, let's dive right in. Could you share, just in case some people are new to you, could you share a little bit about your journey and why you're so passionate about the work that you do?
Yes. So yeah, I did come on this journey from a personal lived experience with pain. I am an endo warrior, as we call them. So I have endometriosis, and well, I've been treated for it, and it doesn't really impact my life so much anymore. But yeah, that's essentially why, because it did impact my life for over a decade, and had to journey that journey and figure things out, and learn the tools and the skills to support myself and navigate through the medical system and all of the stuff. And because I trained in a lot of things, I decided then to train professionally and then bring this work out. And clearly there's a huge need for it. And I'm really passionate about working with people's bodies and with helping people through pain and darkness. Yeah.
That's why I'm so glad you're here, because I know we all know about pain and we know all about darkness here in the PMDD community. And one of last year's big revelations, what really was a jaw dropper, was that there's a lot of connection between our PMDD symptoms and trauma. Could you speak a little bit about trauma, just anything that you think we need to know and how it can affect us?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to define what trauma is in my own sort of understanding of it, because there's loads of different definitions of it. But it's one of the teachers I follow, Peter Levine. I'm training in his particular work. He talks about trauma being not the event that happened to you, but the impact that the event had on your nervous system in the absence of compassionate witness. And so trauma is the things we didn't do or say, and the support we didn't have, and the impact that those things had on our nervous system, and the imprint that leaves on our body, on our nervous system today, and how the trauma, the event that caused a nervous system dysregulation or a nervous system response in the absence of support and an ability to fight or flight or defend ourselves, it gets locked into the nervous system. And so we can live with the psychological and physiological impact of trauma today as a result of something that happened in the past. So yeah, it's quite complex, but there's a lot you can do to work with it.
Yes. And I love that you brought in there this nervous system, because I think I've been hearing it a lot more since the last summit. I feel nervous system has become a lot more, but could you talk about the nervous system and how this has to do more, with the trauma, and how this has to do with some of our PMDD symptoms and even chronic pain?
Yeah. So yeah, that was the other part of your question, wasn't it? Like, what does this have to do with PMDD? And it has a lot to do with PMDD. And even actually the trauma community don't yet acknowledge this, because the trauma community is very much, the teachings on trauma are very much based on just bodies in general. And they're not really like talking about what the hormones are doing. And so that's where my work meets the trauma community, because I'm trying to bring in that conversation around hormones, because in the female experience, with the female sex hormones, what's happening is, okay, we have a menstrual cycle, and PMDD, as we all know, generally happens the week or 10 days before our period comes, right? Those symptoms start to come up. And the reason for that is because after ovulation, which is when the egg gets released from the ovary, there's a hormone called estrogen. And when that drops actually quite quickly after ovulation. And it means that the nervous system becomes a little bit more exposed, because one of the roles of estrogen is to soothe the nervous system. So when estrogen drops, our physiology is primed to be more sensitive in our nervous system, and we're actually going to be more likely to like look for threats and danger. And that's why we can get cranky and moody, because we're like waiting for things to happen. It's very hormonal, it's very somatic, it's not in our heads, this is really happening. And so what happens with trauma, Charisma, is that when we have trauma or the effects of trauma for a long period of time, and we haven't really healed it, even if it's unconscious, because a lot of us carry unconscious trauma, myself included, we sweep it under the carpet as a coping mechanism because we have to get through life. But then as estrogen drops every month with the menstrual cycle, it's like as though that rug that we've shoved everything underneath, it just kind of gets like estrogen, the menstrual cycle is that rug, and we kind of, it gets peeled up, right? And we get to see what's there, and the things that have caused us harm or impacted us on some level, they kind of start coming up to the surface, and that's essentially how I see PMDD. It's this mix between trauma, the nervous system, and the dance of hormones that's happening in the body. And that's kind of, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I see it, as that systemic, holistic, like conversation that's happening. Yeah.
I love that, that you bring that together with the hormones, that estrogen soothes our nervous system. So when that then drops, our nervous system becomes more kind of like, exposed, or like more frail, or a little bit more sensitive. And that's why, like for me, my anger would come up, and all these things that I had swept under the carpet would come up. Every month would be the same story over and over. So I love that you're bringing that together, because that makes sense. It makes it more, less abstract. So thank you.
It's helpful, isn't it?
It's so helpful. I know everybody out there, I hope I have already begun with a note, so y'all better be taking notes too. So you were also, there's this fight, flight, freeze with the nervous system. And also I'm hearing something new come in with a fawn, which I think really applies to me, which I do a lot. So could you just speak a little bit about this thing that we could also get stuck in these responses, right?
Yeah, this is where the knowledge is power piece comes in, because this is like, okay, like I've got trauma, what do I do, right? So there's different states that your nervous system is in all the time, and we can be blended between different states. And I won't make it complicated, I'll keep it simple. But if you visualize a ladder, right, just a ladder, and your nervous system is kind of like a ladder, and at the very bottom you have the freeze response. So like you said, the freeze response is what happens in the nervous system in the face of danger or threat or trauma, when we don't have the ability to defend ourselves, or the ability to leave, or protect ourselves, right? So we go into shutdown, and we see this conversation a lot in, conversations around sexual abuse and that kind of thing. It's like, our bodies go into freeze, we go into a shutdown. That's a very extreme example, by the way, but it can also be, you can have developmental trauma and struggle in intimate relationships. And you might find yourself struggling to speak your truth or connect, in intimate situations, or you might find you might just generally have a lot of trauma from different things in your body, and find yourself, because your body is in this freeze response, there's a lot of energy that goes into the freeze response to protect you. So you might find yourself really tired. You don't have a lot of zest for life in general. It's a lot of energy just to put the wash on. Do you know what I mean? So, and that can be generally speaking, or in relation to a particular topic or context in your life. So that's the more like the freeze response. And it's not a bad thing. It's annoying because takes a lot of energy and it's tiring. And when we're carrying that in our bodies for 5-10 years, that's not very good for our vitality, and especially chronic pain and PMDD, because like I said, all your immune system energy is going into this self-protection. So that's the freeze. And then you have, like, going back to the ladder, above freeze, we have the fight or flight. And that is the sympathetic nervous system, the part of the nervous system where we mobilize, where we do have safety to fight, defend ourselves, or leave a situation. And this can look, very intense, like we're fighting or something, but it can also just be, it's a stress response. So it can be if we're overthinking things in our head, or frantic or overwhelmed with decisions, or in a kind of controlling mindset, or comparing ourselves to other people. That would be very much a fight or flight sympathetic place. And again, a lot of energy goes into that. And it's also kind of a self-protective thing from, in the face of threat or danger. And then the top of the ladder, this is the good part. This is called the ventral vagal in the polyvagal theory. So this is the rest and digest. That's an easier term. Rest and digest. It's where we are safe. We are comfortable in our own skin. We have hope. It's the physiology of hope, Charisma. It's the physiology of knowing that we have choices, that we have options. It's intimacy. It's connection with people. It's being okay with taking our time, and that we don't need to rush everything, like that physiological feeling of feeling like, oh, I feel held and supported in my life. And then you spoke as well to the fawn, and I wouldn't put that on the ladder as such, because it's kind of a blended state, but the fawn response that Charisma mentioned is also very important to consider, particularly for women, because essentially what that is, it's the people-pleasing response in our nervous system, where we we don't even have a relationship with our own needs, and we abandon our needs. We don't know our own needs or our boundaries, and we go along with what we think other people want and do, because we're afraid of conflict. Maybe conflict has been dangerous in the past, or we're afraid of being disapproved of, or being judged and criticized, because we have been. And the fawn response is a very societal thing that gets shaped into us, and I think particularly for women. So something to think about.
It was a big revelation for me. I'm like, oh my goodness, that sounds so familiar.
And same.
When you were talking about the freeze response, something I wanted to ask you, is that also sometimes where procrastination comes in? Like, I know sometimes when I want to do something where I have to kind of, show up and be seen, which for me feels very uncomfortable and dangerous, I don't do that thing. Is that procrastination? Can that be a freeze response of like some trauma that we have from the past?
That's a great question, Charisma. I think it can be. Yeah. And it's kind of for you to decide, because it's your body.
Cool.
Like, and procrastination is actually a way, like I see procrastination as the body is looking for relief. So this is the thing about having a trauma-informed approach, is that you're always thinking what's happening in your behavior, or in your decisions, or in your symptoms. It's like your body is looking for a way to regulate. So procrastination is a way of regulating, like you said, fear, overwhelm, or maybe you're burnt out. Like sometimes procrastination is a good thing, because we've been working too hard and we're just not giving ourselves a break. And it comes then as procrastination, and then we label it and judge ourselves, right? So
absolutely. But it's actually like, take a break, slow down maybe a little bit. So
exactly. Or take it in small, like when you're speaking to that part of it being a freeze, it probably is that it's like, you do have, like, you or the person who's experiencing it has fear and is being triggered in the nervous system. So to break that project down into small bite-sized parts getting support, and also kind of allowing yourself to be a little bit what's called like triggered in the nervous system, a little bit activated with sympathetic energy, like that sympathetic in the middle, without dropping down into freeze, you know. And because the freeze is where we're flooded and we're overwhelmed, and then we're just stuck and we can't get out of there. But if we're in a little bit of sympathetic, that's the hormone of cortisol and adrenaline, by the way. That's actually, we do need that. That's helpful. We can't be in rest and digest all the time. We have to do things in the day and get through things. And the sympathetic part of the nervous system plays a big role in helping us to just move through our to-do list and being motivated. And so if you're finding yourself freezing and procrastinating a lot, ask yourself, how can I regulate this? How can I make this activity a little bit more pleasurable? Or am I trying to be a perfectionist here? Am I putting too much pressure on myself? Do I need support? All of those questions can help you to just shift out of freeze and not rely on procrastination to regulate.
Yes. And that's what I love about the work you do, because it helps us to, you know, anybody out there, y'all, when we start noticing these things like, oh, what's going on? Like, what could this be a response to? What's going on? So let's get practical with this. How can I use this knowledge, right, with the nervous system and the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and all these things to support myself in life with PMDD?
Yeah, it's very empowering. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah. And the thing is as well, like, I know a lot about this stuff and I can speak to it, but I was saying to my friend the other day, it's like, I'm not immune to this. Like just because I know this stuff doesn't mean I don't experience it. So I'm every day like, okay. And it's almost harder. It can be a little bit harder when you know this as well, and you have to be careful of that as well, to not judge yourself. You're like, oh, I'm in freeze too much, because I've done that too. So just be really kind to yourself, because this knowledge is powerful, but just don't use it against yourself. You know, it's to journey what we haven't been given, the support we haven't received that we do deserve now.
That is such a good tip. Yes, don't use this against yourself. Oh, I love that. So you were just also talking about when we notice, you know, we get a little bit activated, a little triggered, a little bit into the sympathetic. What if we get a little bit too far in? How do we regulate our nervous system? Like, how can we help ourselves when it's happening?
Yeah, it's a great question. So whether you find yourself in the freeze or in the sympathetic, I'll actually go back to the ladder again, because it's really helpful. So at the bottom, you have the freeze, and then you have sympathetic, and then you have rest and digest. And the reason why that ladder is important is because it's chronological, Charisma. We can't move from freeze to rest and digest. We have to shift through sympathetic. I know. So we have to climb the ladder, right? Yeah. So if we see ourselves in freeze, well, actually, what I'll start with is saying that every nervous system is different, and every personality and needs and desires and how you experience pleasure and how you regulate will be so different. Some people love to meditate. Some people love to go on long runs. Some people hate those things. So it's so important that you get really curious about your nervous system and make a list of what's called regulating resources for you to lean into and rely on when you find yourself overwhelmed in freeze or in fight or flight. So I'll just speak for myself. One of my freeze resources is, you want to think about something that doesn't take too much effort, because a freeze, like thinking about doing a 20-minute meditation when you're in freeze, it's kind of a bit, it's a bit much. Yeah. And what you want is mobilizing energy. So for me, I just click on my Spotify and I have music, and I'm like able to start moving my body a little bit, or cleaning, if I'm cleaning the kitchen, like putting on some music, and it just lifts my mood a little bit. Yeah. That's a really big one. Small little bite-sized things that help you mobilize, and you'll only really realize what they are when you start to get curious about them for yourself. So it sounds mad, but cleaning is one of mine. I like to be like making lists. If I'm in sympathetic overwhelm, like making a list of the things I need to do, getting organized. I love that. Sitting down and having a cup of tea, or reading a book, or going for a walk, taking a Epsom salt bath. Sometimes I meditate. Like, I don't rely on that. You know what I mean? I rely on these real practical everyday things. And then a huge one that we often forget is something called co-regulation. And that's what we're doing here. We're having an experience together, two nervous systems coming together. And I think we can put pressure on ourselves to get ourselves out of these overwhelmed states, when in actual fact, we need people, we need humans, whether the other person knows that they're doing it or not doesn't matter, right? So friendships, relationships, going into groups, even if you're just sitting, if you work for yourself and you are tired of working alone at home, like going into a cafe, even if you don't know people, you still have people around you.
Yes.
Just getting out into the world, being immersed in you know, society, but definitely having like friendships and connections, co-regulating. That's where we regulate each other's nervous system. And when we're in a freeze response, there's a part of the brain called the prefrontal cortex that is our decision-making place in our brain. And because we're in a survival response, it doesn't really turn on very well. So it's hard to actually pull ourselves out. So we have to have a few go-to things. So for me, it's music, people, and walking.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love that, because if freeze response is one of your go-tos, maybe you can just have like a sticky note somewhere in your home, like that, you know, if you just look up when you're in your freeze, you're like, go to your favorite cafe or put on that music. You have like 3 little things and you're like, oh, I'll just do that. I'll just click my Spotify, and that could possibly help. I really love that one. Thanks for sharing that one.
Yeah. And the good thing about it is it builds momentum. So as you're listening to the music, you'll start feeling better. Yeah. And then and then that's the kind of way out of procrastination as well, because it's this kind of like domino effect, you know, and then you do have to track your system to make sure you then don't overdo it, like in terms of working and stuff. But yeah, just keeping an eye on where you are in your system every day and getting curious about like what supports you and what triggers you. Yeah. Like it's really helpful. Yeah.
That is really helpful. Or maybe write it down, keep a journal at the end of the day, notice, or however you do that. And so you were talking about going up the ladder, and I was just wondering, do I have to go from freeze to like fight and flight and up the ladder, or do I just go from freeze? So do I have to then do some punching after that, or how do I get up there?
That's a good question. No, it doesn't, like, it's not as kind of clear as that. It's sort of more a metaphor. So the freeze response in the nervous system, it needs sympathetic energy. So it needs mobilizing energy. It doesn't mean we have to go into a sympathetic overwhelm, because there's a difference between sympathetic energy, which is what we're doing now. We're conversing and there's like activation in my nervous system and I'm on camera, you know, and this is being recorded, and I'm not overwhelmed though. I'm not like shutting down. I know what to say somewhat, I hope. And you know, like, so sympathetic energy is that energy that helps us like get things done. It motivates us, it inspires us, it gets us through the day. But if it's too much flooded, then we get stuck there, and then we have health problems if we're there long term. So if you find yourself in freeze, the mobilizing energy is the music, or it is the dancing, or it is the cleaning, or it is, you know, the connection with another person. And then if you're flooded in sympathetic, if you're really like stressed and overwhelmed, because that's not freeze, that's sympathetic, and you're just finding it really hard to calm down, the same tools, or making the list, organizing yourself, taking things off your to-do list, asking yourself like, where am I being too hard on myself? It just settles the system. And then from that feeling more organized, more clear, more contained, then we shift up into, or the opportunity is to shift up into rest and digest. Yeah. And that's where we're like, oh, life's okay. I've got this. I trust myself. I feel supported in life. It's going to be fine. I have options. You know, there is hope. And I will say, it's a gorgeous place to be, isn't it? But I will say, like, if you've spent a lot of time in freeze or in sympathetic, which a lot of us have, it can be dysregulating even in itself to spend a lot of time in the rest and digest. So don't worry if you don't stay there very long, because you have to learn to do that through your nervous system, through doing this work. Yeah.
I see. So it could be like too good.
Yeah, the body is like, wait, this isn't safe. I'm supposed to be frantic and trying to survive. And if you're like feeling all hopeful and trusting for like more than you're used to, your system will just go back to its original place. And that's normal. That's all part of it. It's like it's like learning a new language. You just have to keep on kind of practicing.
I'm glad that you always say that, kind of to bring in that compassion, right? That if we don't need to be in this state all the time. We would kind of go down and over and around a little bit. We're talking about freeze. I know fight is one of my like main ones. Like I like to lash out. Could you talk about the fight response a little bit?
Yeah, I guess the fight response would be, so that's part of the sympathetic response in the nervous system.
Yeah.
And the reason why we might fight in an interpersonal relationship or within us, if we're reacting to a group or an idea, or we're judging people or ourselves, it's a protective thing. It's probably anger that's coming through. It's, a part of our training that we might have received when we were growing up, whether it was something we witnessed or it was the only option for us because we didn't have a route out. So fight was the other option for our nervous system to do. So it's not, there's nothing like bad about it. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, it is what it is. The problem becomes is if it's causing harm to ourselves or others, or if it's impacting relationships. And I know that this can really show up for people who have PMDD symptoms. And it's the same lesson. It's the same thing around learning to regulate the anger, learning to feel the sympathetic charge without like taking the action or making the decision or saying the thing. Yes. And the more space, that's a real mindfulness approach, isn't it? Like the more we can hold that tension in our bodies and learn to do that, and learn to rely on our own regulating resources and shift up the ladder, the more we begin to take the edge off the fight response, but if you do have a fight response, just remind yourself that is there to protect you. And that is there because of your history of trauma, because of what you've witnessed, because of what you've learned directly and indirectly. And it's actually quite a good thing. It's just, it's just not maybe helping you in the here and now anymore,
Yes, exactly. Oh, that was one of my big things to work through, to be able to sit with these energies and to be able to sit with these thoughts that come in and so judgmental and just talking about everybody, and to just be able to, oh, it's here again. Oh, how interesting. And I have lost that need to like make it go outward, because I can just be with it and kind of regulate that. So thank you for sharing that one.
That's so powerful, Prisma.
Yeah, I always call it, you gotta sit with your shit.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
So you're also a menstrual cycle coach, and you offer professional training for people to also be cycle coaches and facilitators, which I absolutely love. And I know I've talked to some people who've been through your training and they absolutely loved it. So why is it so important to combine your polyvagal approach with the menstrual cycle awareness?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the polyvagal approach allows for me to work with the menstrual cycle from a trauma-informed perspective, because every person with a menstrual cycle has a different trauma story, and the polyvagal theory helps me to understand people's relationship with their cycles on a deeper level. And, if I just give people advice on self-care, it's not going to be enough, because it's not sustainable. So when we work from that nervous system approach, it's just more sustainable in terms of understanding our patterns and our behaviors and our self-protective responses. One of my things was like, I'd be quite a sympathetic person, like busy, and when I was on my own health journey with this, I guess my self-protective response was to make this really long list of self-care things I needed to do every day, and it was just not realistic, and it came from a place of fear because of chronic pain, so I had to learn how to let go of everything on the list. Yes. And learn to trust a few things that would support me, so that now, what was your question again?
how the polyvagal approach, why it's important to combine it with the menstrual cycle awareness.
Yeah. And then the menstrual cycle awareness work allows for what I call a somatic feminist lens in trauma. So the two are kind of working together. Yeah. Because the trauma world haven't yet acknowledged the female sort of experience yet. Anyway, I'm onto them. So yeah. Because like I said, it's like we all have trauma, but women's trauma will express itself differently depending on what's happening in our menstrual cycle. And that lens is really important in understanding how we care for women and the treatment options that we decide to embark on.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how can we use our menstrual cycle to create better relationships with ourselves? Like, just, do you have any words of wisdom on that?
Yeah, so menstrual cycle awareness, that's the chat we did last year. I have a free guide of that on my website, which I'll talk about in a minute. But menstrual cycle awareness is all about understanding your menstrual cycle is not just your periods, which I thought it was, right? For years, I think we all did, just those like 5 days. And then we didn't have this thing. But no, it's a whole like cyclical every day. It's there in your body. It's not a separate part of you. It's there, and every day matters. And so it's broken into the 4 seasons. Menstruation is winter, spring is the week after menstruation, summer is ovulation, and then autumn is that premenstrual week that's the struggle for the PMDD warriors. And so learning how to understand the seasons and who we are on a nervous system level, what our needs are, how to do self-care. And cycles, tracking your cycle. You can use an app where you can put it in your diary, and learning to build a relationship with your cycle is a really powerful thing for cycle self-care.
It is really powerful. And it was a game changer for me learning about these seasons. And I'm in my inner winter right now. And, I'm doing these interviews and I'm like, well, I want to show up for my community, but I'm also then taking time to have a bath, go for a walk, relax on the couch, like to go into that rest and to weave it into my life. And it has absolutely revolutionized and changed my whole life. If someone because you work with people one-on-one in your group program. So if someone with PMDD comes to you, where would you start? Like, are there certain questions you ask? Where would you start?
Yeah, well, I start with listening to hear their story, obviously. Yeah. How does PMDD impact you? Because I think PMDD is a syndrome, isn't it? It's not a blood test you can take and get a diagnosis. Yeah. So everyone will have a different experience of it. And I'd be curious, like, where they want to get to, what their goals are. And then we do work around the nervous system. I start, really helping them build a relationship with their nervous system, get curious about it. And then we weave in menstrual cycle awareness, hormones, some work on diet. And then depending on the person, we do some trauma work as well, through a practice called somatic experiencing. That's the work of Peter Levine, where we can work with trauma and begin to release it from the nervous system. Because if we're clinging on to a lot of stuff, it's a lot of energy going into that, so allowing that to unravel gently over time is very liberating. And
that sounds so beautiful, that unraveling. I think it's such a beautiful word. Thank you for bringing that one into my mind. I'm going to write it down right now. So you work with people, as I just said, one-on-one in your group coaching programs. Could you just share a little bit? Do you have a course? Is it only one-on-one now? How can we work with you?
Good. Yeah, good question. I just do one-to-one at the moment for clients, for one-to-one. And that is on Zoom. I work with people all over the world. I have free consultations. I also have free courses that are self-guided you can take. And so you can hop on over to my website, which I'm changing my website domain. So at the moment it's yourcyclematters.com, but maybe when this is launched, it'll be lisadejongcoaching.com. So try them both and you'll find it.
I'll put the link. I'll put the link under the interview.
You put the link in. Super. And then, if you are interested in training professionally and integrating this into your yoga teacher or your therapist, or you're interested in bringing this into your workplace, I train professionals. That's how you can work with me.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for supporting our community with this approach that I really feel is so unique to you, like how you bring this all together. And that's what I feel is so needed for PMDD, because our symptoms are different. Our histories are different. Every body is even different. And you bringing this kind of a whole approach into it is just, it's revolutionary. Lisa, thank you so much for what you do. And I know last year you did a workshop after this time. Are you doing a workshop this year, Lisa?
We are, aren't we? We're doing a workshop together.
Yes.
What did we say we do it on? Did we say we do it on anger or something?
I think we're going to do it on rage and anger. Yes.
Rage and anger. Okay. Yeah. That's a really important part of PMDD. So yeah, we'll do a workshop. So keep an eye out for that. Definitely.
Thank you, Lisa, for that, because I know that's such a huge part. And we are at time. Do you have any last words of hope or encouragement for anyone out there who has PMDD?
I do. This is kind of revolutionary, and I'm going to dare to say it because I was thinking about this before coming on here, which is that what if your recovery journey could be pleasurable? Woo. So I'm a big fan of pleasure, like in all senses of the word. And it's a big part of my work and changing our relationship with pleasure. And so healing doesn't have to mean going into the trauma and reliving it and re-traumatizing ourselves. It can be gentle and slow, and it can bring relief, and it can therefore be pleasurable and nourishing for our bodies. And I think that if we go on our healing journeys from that mindset, then we'll be safe, and we'll feel comfortable,
Lisa, I think you just shifted the whole paradigm here. That's such a good thought, rather than, how can I fix this, get this done? Like, how can I bring pleasure into this? And how can I see my recovery journey as something pleasurable? All right, Lisa, you set the bar high for us. Y'all out there, please share your gold nuggets in the Facebook group. Come to the workshop. Let's do that, and let's bring pleasure back into our recovery journey. Thank you so much, Lisa, for being here again.
Thanks for having me, and loads of love to everyone. It's such a pleasure. It's such a pleasure to be here.
Oh, it's so good to have you here. All right, y'all, go out there, bring that pleasure back, and see you in the Facebook group. Bye.
Bye.